the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of
Start again. Good morning, and can I welcome members, officers and the public to today's meeting of the Transport Committee. Our main item of business today is a discussion on autonomous passenger vehicles in London. Before I begin, I'd like to say that this is a meeting in public rather than a public meeting, and we therefore do not allow contributions from the public gallery. We've already heard evidence from academics, charities, representatives of taxi and private hire drivers and autonomous vehicle operators, and we do need quiet to be able to get through the questions we have today. Please can everyone make sure that your electronic devices are switched off or to silent mode, and can I also ask guests and members to position their microphones so you can be heard clearly. Can I start by asking our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Assemblymember Moema, for whom Assemblymember Harani is substituting.
Thank you, and thank you, Assemblymember Harani. And can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? And can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of June 2026 to be signed by me as a correct record? And can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions arising from its previous meetings and the additional correspondence sent? So we now move on to our main item of business, a discussion on autonomous passenger vehicles in London. I'd like to welcome to the Chamber our guests for today's meeting. So we have Christina Calderato, who is Director of Strategy at TfL, and Danny Price, who is Director of Sponsored Services and Regulatory Compliance at TfL. It's a mouthful of a title. So we now move on to our first question, which is for you, Christina. TfL's purpose is to manage and integrate London's public transport network, the strategic roads and transport infrastructure. So do you see automated passenger services having a role in delivering for London?
Morning, thank you. Yes, I think they could do, and I think that's a really important part of the debate that we're having at the moment, is that we have this new technology arriving, automated vehicles, and there are definitely potential benefits of that. And I think that's what we'd like to see and like to harness. And I think particularly there are potential safety benefits, particularly when you look on a kind of vehicle per vehicle basis. But our job as a strategic integrated authority is to make sure that all the modes that operate in London contribute to making us a healthy and sustainable city, contribute to the aims of the Mayor's transport strategy, and that they do work in a kind of complementary and integrated way. And I think for that reason, it's really important when we are looking at automated vehicles that we try and shape this from the outset to make sure that we are making the most of those benefits, that anything that we can gain in terms of safety. In parts of London, these kind of vehicles might make it easier to not need to own a car. It might make it easier to expand the reach of the transport network and kind of link people up to it where there might be gaps in the network or where the network's not so dense. But we do need to make sure that we're doing that in a sensible and controlled way. And what we're not just doing is adding in more vehicles in an unconstrained way, which could have negative outcomes for congestion. It could have negative outcomes for safety if they're not kind of deployed in the best way. We need to make sure that they complement the public transport network and don't kind of act in competition with it and draw people out of mass transport and into more individual vehicles, because ultimately that's not sustainable for the city. So I think lots of opportunities, but we need to really shape that to make sure that we do get the benefits, but we don't see unintended consequences.
Thank you. That's really clear and helpful to start us off. Within the automated passenger services permitting framework, TfL's role appears to be one of being a consenting authority with the power to reject or consent to the rollout of autonomous passenger vehicle services in London. Can TfL put conditions if it gives consent? And how is TfL ensuring it's in a position to make an informed decision on this now? I don't know who wants to go first, because that's a question for both of you.
Yeah, I can kick off with that. And I think you are, asking very sensible questions about a process which is yet to be tested. But you're right, that the way the process is set out is that the applicants would apply to the DVSA for a permit, and then that would come to us as the consenting authority, and we would have a 6-week window to consider that application and then decide whether to consent, in which case we provide our consent, or if we don't, that we provide written reasons. And if we don't respond within that 6-week window, then consent is deemed to have been given. So we need to make sure that we are set up for that. We are trying to do that now. We're sort of developing our own guidance so we can be really clear, given that is quite a time-limited window, that we are very clear what we expect to see from operators. And DfT and TfL are both clear that we expect operators to pre-engage with us before they put in that permit application. Because, as you say, our powers are quite limited. They're different here than they are in a licensing space. So we have this kind of stop-go decision at the point of consent, but after that consent has been given and the permit's been issued, we have no further ongoing role once vehicles are out on street. So we need to make sure we get that right. And as to whether we can have conditions, I think the way that that's likely to need to work is that we will need to set those out in our requirements, and then if they are met, then we can give our consent. But we don't have a formal role where we could put conditions on a permit because we're not issuing the permit. So we either give our consent or we don't.
So when you say putting conditions in your requirements, is that sort of like a sort of document you're proposing to prepare for anyone who is seeking consent to operate?
Yeah, and we've been working really closely with DfT on this as well to try and understand, what's in their guidance, what there needs to be sort of supplemented from our guidance, and what the kind of balance of that is. But yes, I think we would need to be making clear in that guidance what our expectations would be around service levels, making the points I've just made about how we need to ensure that they are complementing public transport, not kind of pulling away from them. So yes, we do propose to have a guidance document, but I think in all likelihood you're not going to be able to just look at a document, which is why I think that engagement is going to be really important. And I think the way everybody envisages this working, and hopefully this will work well, is that when those applications come to us, they look like what we expect them to look like, having had the guidance, having had that pre-engagement, and we are able to consent because they reflect what we've asked for. But if they haven't, that's where we'll need to do that, rejecting consent and giving our reasons for it. But I think this is a very new system for all parties, so we will learn from it, I think, as we go along.
And are you worried about the fact that it feels as if, London has devolved powers on transport? The Mayor's transport strategy set out in the GLA Act is, a sort of legal obligation on the Mayor to and TfL to make sure that that you're achieving those goals of 80% of journeys by walking, cycling and public transport by 2041, the Vision Zero, the traffic reduction goals. Are you worried that this is a kind of a loss of devolved powers to London?
I think it is our position, our clearly stated position, and the Mayor's position as well, that ultimately this licensing power should come back and sit with TfL, because I think if we're going to be able to plan the network in a strategic and integrated way, having a mode which sits outside of that makes that very different. And I think a lot of the focus in these early stages is on the kind of PHV-like services, because that's what we're seeing coming forward and talking about now. But if you think about a bus-like service, we've got an entire citywide bus network that we're able to flex according to people's need. But if that consenting power for a bus-like service was given at one point and we had no further ongoing influence over that, then you could see how that would be problematic for integrated planning. So we have made the point in all of our consultation responses that we think that this power should come back and sit as it does for other modes. I can understand why at the outset there's a need for kind of consistency at a sort of safety level at a new national thing, but I think we have made the case and continue to make the case that that licensing power should come back to TfL.
Okay, thank you. Danny?
If I could add, morning, first of all, if I could add that the guidance document would envisage being really clear on any operator being able to support the Vision Zero ambitions, that we have accessibility challenges dealing with the challenges around the network, and we'd also advocate that there is a gradual deployment, which we think is really, really important. and it's something that we learned from when we introduced the e-scooter trial. So we do have some past learnings that we think we can apply to this.
Okay, we're going to be getting into much more detail on Vision Zero and accessibility as we go through the meeting, so I'm not going to pick up on that any further. The autonomous passenger vehicle framework, which you produced in 2025, does that provide a sort of benchmark for the decisions that you may find yourself being asked to take?
So I think it was a starting point. I think throughout this, as we've seen this technology developing, we've wanted to make sure that we do have a presence, that we've got a statement about what we'd like to see from this at a fairly high level, but kind of setting out that how we expect services to align with the MTS objectives and support what we're trying to do on a kind of wider basis. And some of the documents that we have up now have been, in this phase that we are in at the moment with trialling on street. We have no role in that. There is no requirement for anybody to tell us that they're doing that. But we have put up on our website that we would like companies operating in London to come to us and tell us about that. And we have had people do that. So taking a proactive approach there, I think, has been beneficial in trying to get some of that early engagement. But where we're talking about actual services coming on street now, we will need something more comprehensive than that, which is what we're working on in terms of the guidance. So I think it's probably helpful for you to see how our sort of thinking has evolved as we've progressed through AV development. But we will need more than that.
And are you going to be publishing your criteria, your kind of any sort of framework that you've got that you'll have in place for consent?
Yes, we will do. We are working hard on getting that finalised now, as you can imagine, as I say, between us, conversations with DFT, and making sure everybody understands everybody's legal requirements and making sure we've got it all right. We're in that sort of process now. But I think the other thing to say is even once we've got that guidance and we're able to publish it, this is going to be, as I said, a learning process for everyone. So that will continue to iterate. We'll continue to take feedback on it as we go.
And so you're clearly sort of in a bit of a hurry to get something published. Are you worried about the timescale? What's the earliest you think that you might find yourselves in a position where you've got that 6-week window for consent?
So not for some time. I don't think we're in a sort of rush to get it out. I think we're conscious that lots of people want to see what it says. Lots of people are looking to us to see what TfL's statement is, and there's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes. So I think it'd be helpful for us to be able to kind of share something sooner rather than later. In terms of when we might get an application in, they opened, I think it's on the 15th of May, someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but so far there are no vehicles that are actually listed under the AV Act. So the very first thing that needs to happen is the vehicles are listed as AVs, and then that pre-engagement would need to happen with DFT and with TfL, and then an application would go into DFT, and then DVSA, then it goes into their process. I don't know how long that takes yet. We haven't had one. And then we will get the 6-week window. But they have been very clear and open with us that they will engage with us throughout. But so far, no vehicles are listed, no applications have been put in.
OK, and so just in terms of timing then, are you expecting this, that you might find yourself in that 6-week window in October, in November, December or next year?
It's very hard for us to say. I don't know how long the process of listing the vehicle will take. I don't know how long the sort of DVSA process will take, but we are trying to get ourselves in a position to be ready for that as soon as possible. So yes, we would like to think that anything that comes forward, if it was going to be September, October, we would be well placed to deal with that.
Okay, thank you. So you're not expecting anything before September?
I have no expectations about a timeline at the moment. So yes, I think that's fair to say. But I also I don't know what operators are planning, and I don't know when they're planning to submit. But yes, I think that sounds reasonable given that we're
okay.
Mid-July.
And then final question from me: given that TfL cannot revoke consent once it's been granted, how are you going to take decisions sort of now that are going to be future-proofed to ensure that if there are those potential negative impacts on congestion, which maybe make the buses less efficient, which means that then people stop riding TfL buses, so that would have a pretty catastrophic impact on some of the lower income Londoners who use buses as their main form of public transport. How are you going to make sure that you avoid those negative impacts and that you've got, you mentioned potential safety benefits. So yes, you kind of, I get that you kind, vehicles that behave and according to the highway code are potentially helpful in a city. But how are you going to avoid, kind of getting yourselves locked in, having given consent to a situation that actually has negative impacts on our city?
And that's what we're spending a huge amount of time now thinking about. So we're trying to think ahead of all of those things that might happen. Learning from other cities' experience as well. So I don't think we've seen anywhere that's kind of directly comparable to a London context. So it's for us thinking about what's going to be locally appropriate. So that's thinking about where things might be operating, where services might be operating, number of vehicles, things like empty running. Can we kind of cap that? Can we have what the data sharing requirements that we'll need? Where will drop off and pick up need to happen? So we're trying to think through in a very kind of comprehensive way, but also being realistic. This hasn't happened before. We're not going to know what happens until it feeds back. So I think the data sharing and monitoring is going to be really important. But I think crucially, the length of those initial permits will be really important, because if you give, as you say, we do everything we can to think about it in advance, then something comes in and something happens that we hadn't expected would happen. You don't want that to be a 12, 18-month permit. So I think the initial permit should be a fairly short duration, so that we can make sure that if there are any unintended consequences, we can have the appropriate local oversight and levers to deal with that before locking into something that's long-term that we're not able to affect.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Danny, did you have anything you wanted to add to that section?
Just to repeat the earlier point, I think a gradual rollout is what we'd be advocating, so we can learn as part and parcel of this process, rather than a full hit. So that's something that's going to be very clear when our guidance comes out.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just to add, I think we will continue to make the case that we think we should be able to suspend operations if we see something that's safety related. We're not just going to sort of say, well, given that we can't, we really think that's an important power that we should have.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Assemblymember Bukhari.
Thank you. Yeah, just to kind of reiterate, it would be really good to have that openness and transparency about the timelines on the guidance document and when contracts are being consented to. That'd be great. Thank you.
So I think on guidance, we won't be very much longer, and we'll be able to tell you and share that, no problem. I think the timelines around processes, we won't know, but again, we can flag as and when something, the first one comes up, so that everyone's...
As long as we get that confirmed, that openness and transparency from you, that would be great. Yeah,
I mean, the permit application won't come to us. It will go to DVSA.
Okay, understood. So I want to talk about engagement from TfL's perspective with the prospective autonomous passenger vehicle operators in London. Can you tell us about how you've engaged, what the process has been like, what have been the challenges?
So we are and have been engaging with a number of potential operators. I want to say engaging, it's been a lot of kind of introductory conversations, a lot of exploratory conversations, people explaining to us what they've done in other places and in other cities and kind of talking about what the potential benefits could be. As I say, we haven't actually had any applications yet. So in those conversations, we've been explaining our position about the MTS and what we'd need to see. So I think really the output of that will be seen when the permit applications start to come through. But we have made our kind of requirements, our focus on safety, our focus on MTS outcomes, our focus on needing to complement the public transport network. There's more than that, but, at a very high level. And about, areas of operation. So we have been communicating what we need. I think operators are keen to demonstrate that they'd like to operate in London, but I think the precise details of what they want to bring forward, we'll have to wait and see in those permit applications.
So you haven't had any applications?
No.
In terms of discussions about permits from the DVSA, what have you had about that?
So we are in constant contact with CCAV, the Centre for Connected and Automated Vehicles, and DVSA, DFT. So there are really good working relationships, I would say, across that, and trying to make sure that we get the right processes in place, notwithstanding the fact that we think there are things that need to change about this process and the licensing. But all parties are working together to try and make sure that we get, within the constraints that we currently have at least, all the powers and the time and the information that we need. So there is a lot of engagement between people at our working level.
Okay. Now, my colleagues
And at a senior level, actually, I should say.
My colleague's going to be talking about powers, but I don't want to talk about powers specifically. I want to talk about capacity from your end when you're going through this process of engagement and discussions, and it's a lot. It sounds like a lot, and the conversations that we've had with the vehicle operators have pointed out that such as Wave and Waymo have pointed out that they don't feel that there is a single point person in TfL, that they feel that there is that discussion that's happening about the process. Would there be a point person, or is that you from TfL?
Yes, it's within my team. There is a point person. There is a point person that they're able to speak to, and they do all speak to. And I've met with some of them as well. And so there is a very clear point of contact. Danny's nodding. I mean, because there is a world in which this kind of straddles both of our spheres, but we have been clear about the process within TfL, that my team is at entry point. We're looking at this as a new mode, as a kind of strategic fit, first of all. And then there's a licensing element which is different for some operators, which we might come on to later. But it's about making sure that it fits within our regulatory framework of our other modes that we regulate as well. But for operators, we're being really clear. You come through my team.
And you're confident that you've got the capacity to deal with things that are incredibly complex and could get even more complex. Do you feel that you might need to, at some point, expand the team, create a position that is more responsible for this as a particular process as itself, rather than yourself on your, and you're on your own? You might need somebody with maybe some specialist expertise that really can solve the issues that may come up.
Yeah, so I mean, I have great confidence in my team and in the people that we have working on this across TfL. So you're right, in terms of scale, this could get quite big. And in terms of expertise, I think the people we've got working it have really developed expertise, having been in these conversations with all players for quite a long time. We do need to keep an eye on what that work balance looks like, but equally, that might be that this is an area that is growing, and I've got other areas that are quieter. It might be about reprioritising resource. So definitely we need to make sure that we've got the right resource and resilience there, and with the different expertise from people across network operations, from across licensing and regulation, from across strategy, policy, looking at our other modal policies. So we do need to make sure that we have all those kind of heads in the room, if you like.
So you're willing to be flexible, you're willing to expand, but do you have the funding to do that?
I don't necessarily think at the moment it's a question of funding. It's about how we prioritise our time and resources.
Okay.
But I think, again, it's slightly unknown at this stage. So you're
thinking kind of using your existing staff but in a different way. Is that what you're thinking more than...
Yeah, exactly. And that happens a lot. New projects will come, they will complete, but we kind of...
I am a little bit concerned because this is so developing at a rate that, we may not be expecting to see. So how are you going to deal with that?
So I think one of the things we've definitely done, and we've been doing quite recently, and we're continuing to do, is making sure we get the sum of parts between both of our teams and wider teams within TfL. So there's been a real review about how our teams work together to make sure we get the right focus on the right things, that there aren't duplication of activities, and that we've already seen has perhaps had some benefits, but that will be a continued priority as well. And there's just to an earlier point that you mentioned that Christina touched on, we do have established relationships with operators who are likely to be, we would think, going forward with proposals. And in that instance, it's actually really helpful to have established relationships, and that does, help sometimes, particularly in relation to our resourcing of those relationships.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just clarify the applications that you're expecting? Are they for fully autonomous passenger services without a safety driver, or are you expecting people to be applying effectively for a private hire licence for the human safety driver in driving in an autonomous vehicle?
Do you want to take this?
I'll take this one. So there are two absolute separate things. So any application for a private hire vehicle licence is with a driver. So government, within their guidance, were really clear that any autonomous vehicle with driver that was looking to operate a service will need to go through a PHV licence route. Our role is to assess that. So we have been engaging with Wave and with Uber, who publicly have made that really clear anyway, so I can
Yeah.
sort of share that information. And to be really clear, there will be a driver in place should a licence be given. That driver will be responsible for all the driving activities, so that it won't change from any of the other driver accountabilities that we have within that licensing. The vehicle will be inspected and licensed, so any differences and changes from that vehicle. Now, the body of the vehicle for Wave is a vehicle that we see elsewhere in PHV, but obviously it's been modified, so we will be seeking confirmation of independent assurance for all those modifications, including roof rack and bits of detail like that. And, of course, the driver will need to be a PHV licensed driver. So the proposal is for that to come under an Uber licence. We're in consideration discussions with them. I can't say too much more about where we are at that point. But that is very different from the APS permitting scheme which the government are regulating. This is specifically through PHV, what I'm talking about, specifically through PHV, and there's been one application.
There is a live application
Yes.
on that one. So
And it's under the, what I should say, is under the existing licence of Uber.
okay, so it is so that although fully autonomous passenger services are not going to be seen until the whole process of consent and everything has gone through, but potentially we could see Uber with a private hire driver operating a Wave autonomous vehicle, offering passenger services in an autonomous vehicle, but with a safety driver.
With a driver who is fully accountable for all driving activities at all times, yeah.
And that is something that could happen immediately.
We're having those discussions, so sorry for being vague, but we can't give any further information because we're still having those discussions with them.
But it's not waiting for the other consenting process.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Assembly Member Hirani.
Yeah, thank you. Just on this issue, so what is the current status of the drivers that are in the testing or the tested vehicles?
Their existing licensed drivers are being proposed, so people that are already licensed within the licence and regulation that TfL regulate.
So they are currently in the vehicles that are being tested at the moment, so they've already gone through the PHL?
At the moment, that's what's been discussed, yes. So,
Okay.
and we would only ever allow drivers should this be agreed.
I think
that are licensed.
that's true for the vehicles that want to apply to carry passengers through the
Correct.
PHV route, but the vehicles which are just trialling on street, not carrying passengers now with a driver, they're not PHV drivers necessarily. I mean, they're just drivers employed by those operators.
Will that be reviewed? I mean, I know, so there's concern based on an incident in Harlesden in my constituency where a AV went through a police ticker barrier at a crime scene, which has caused concern. And I understand now that the driver was in control of the vehicle. So given the incident, will that be reviewed?
So we have no powers in this space. So the vehicles that are out there trialling now, we have no role in that trialling. They don't need to tell us that they're doing it. So we are not able to affect that. But I think what we have seen is a number of incidents. That's one of them. And there is no obligation on the operators to tell us that those incidents have happened. I should say that they have been. They have been sort of proactively offering that information, and we have to take what they're giving us at face value. But once we are operating in the full pilot and we have given our consent and it's a permitted situation, then we would get that actual data for ourselves to be able to satisfy ourselves. And I think that's where, if we were concerned that there was a safety issue, we would want to be able to take action.
So given there has been a safety issue, is there any lobbying upwards to try and get those powers or whatever you need from your perspective to make sure that the testing is also happening in a safe manner?
Yeah, so we are consistently asking for powers, as is the Mayor. We are clear that we think that those licensing powers should sit with us, but in the current situation we have no ability to impact that.
Thank you, Chair.
You, Assembly Member Turrell.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Thinking about the regulatory framework as it currently exists, are you satisfied that TfL has sufficient powers to shape the service in the best way for Londoners?
So I think we would like to see it differently. I think I've probably made that point. So within, as I say, the current regulation, we have safety is our absolutely top priority. We want to make sure that we can absolutely have a Vision Zero level of safety. We are not responsible for the safety of these vehicles. That is something which is done by the Vehicle Certification Agency. But we are trying not to look at this as a kind of technology-led piece. This is more about modes and transport in London. And while we don't have a role in determining whether a vehicle is listed or not, at the moment we also don't have a role in giving those permits. We don't have a role in being able to suspend or withdraw those permits. So within our consenting powers, as I say, we are trying to use the levers that we have as effectively as we can. We will try to be really robust in setting out the guidance. We will absolutely want to try and engage with all of those operators, make sure that anything that comes in works. We don't want to be a blocker. We don't want to be refusing consent for everything. But we do want to make sure that, given that we don't have that ongoing power, that we can be as robust as we can. So yes, I think we would like to see a bit more. You've probably got the gist. I'll stop talking.
Okay. So you've touched on some of the things that will be on there. But what is the and you just mentioned in response to the previous answer about the ongoing lobbying to try and get more powers. What is the wish list that TfL has for what powers that you have beyond what you've already mentioned?
I think the really key one in the short term is this ability to suspend or withdraw. So I think once we get to the point where these initial permits are being issued and they're on London streets, if we see something that is concerning or unsafe, we need to take action on that. So I think that's the very first thing, is that we should be able to have some ongoing influence after the vehicles are on street in London. More broadly then, I think in the longer term, we would like to see that full licensing power come back so that we have that in the full way. But in the short term, certainly at least power to suspend.
Thank you. And if you were given the power to suspend, what kind of data would you be looking at to base any kind of suspension on? What would be the key things you'd be looking at to see whether this is successfully working?
So I think we need, there'll be a comprehensive suite of data, I'm sure, that we will need. And I think working with the operators to understand what is available and what will be useful to us will be really important. I think it's not just, though, about if there is a collision. I think we also need to be looking, if we're thinking about Vision Zero, is thinking about all those near misses. What about the sudden acceleration? What about the sudden braking? So I don't have a list of criteria of bits of data here for you, but I think it'd be taking a really holistic approach and not just this happened, are we concerned about it? But it's trying to see, mitigate the risk of that happening. As I say, the Vision Zero approach, we just don't want these vehicles to be a causal factor in any way in any incident in London.
Thank you. My final question then is that we are expecting a change in government. Well, I think we are getting a change in government this month, and Andy Burnham has spoke about autonomous vehicles and taking a bit more of a cautious approach to this. So does that give you hope that TfL may be able to get more of these powers out of the new government than it perhaps has with the current one?
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yes.
Thanks. I've got a couple of follow-ups on all of that, because obviously that was all linked up in all sorts of areas. Firstly, I wanted to ask about this this engagement process, this sort of pre-engagement process. Apologies if I use any of language that isn't exactly how you described it, but this pre-engagement process that's going on with at least some of the operators, or that you want to go, and I can totally understand. And you're using that, obviously, to sort of develop document guidelines, I think, in terms of seeing whether you can shape what the applications are, so you don't get into a, so we do that early. I think what concerns me a bit is that, obviously, time may be short, so you're intending to publish these guidelines at some point, and you say it's an iterative process, but what really is the process for a wider group of people, particularly Londoners, to influence that? Because what really concerns me, and especially speaking to groups of Londoners about this at different times, is they sort of know it's happening, but they don't really understand that potentially you know, this will be happening later this year. And the voices in the space are primarily the lobbying operations of the operators, to understand what they're doing. So how are you going to ensure that there is a genuine debate about those guidelines when you publish them?
So I think certainly we've tried to not just be limited to those voices sort of in the debate. What we've tried to do, or what we're trying to do with the guidelines, is to make sure that we are picking up particularly those issues around accessibility. And I think I think part of this is it is really hard for people to get their heads around. It's very new and different. And as you say, people have a sort of vague awareness of it. So I think it'll be helpful for us if we can provide something for people to look at. And then we'll want to make sure that we are doing that engagement with accessibility groups. It's something that we're clear that we expect operators to have done as well, but we want to make sure that we have their input on our guidance. We have already had sessions with taxi and PHV industry reps, so we are trying to kind of get a fully rounded views from people who are likely to be affected by this and who know about it. And then I think that we'll put something together that we can help to sort of structure conversations with people who might not be so close to the detail, but we will absolutely want to make sure that we get feedback from people that this does represent everything that they want and need it to see. That might not be possible for everybody all the time, but in that kind of usual fashion. So
is there intended to be an actual consultation process? And just to say, and I don't want to stray into any of, because we're going to come on to safety and jobs and all those subjects, and also wider impact. But you know, there are groups, for instance, you know, disabled people's organisations, trade unions and stuff like that, who are pretty clued up about. But what Londoners in general, this could be really profound. We've seen it in other cities be really, really profound, but genuinely their understanding of how it might impact it is pretty low. Yeah. It's actually pretty easy to explain if you actually have a conversation, but it's not a citywide discussion. So is there an intention to try and start that?
So I think it's a really good point. I think we'll definitely need to do sort of broader public engagement on it. And perhaps the point of having that guidance is probably when people have got something tangible to kind of look at. We're not proposing to do a full public consultation. I feel that's probably not the most useful way to get feedback on something like this, if we also need to be ready in a timely fashion to be able to respond in our 6-week window. Otherwise, consent will be deemed to have been given. So I think there's a kind of practice. But I think because we will be aligned to the MTS, we're going to be quite clear on what the kind of parameters of that guidance will be. But particularly around the areas of detail, I think that's where we really will be keen to hear from, as you say, those elements of the community and different stakeholders who are really knowledgeable, who will have something to bring to it. So once we've got that guidance, we will absolutely start on that engagement. And I think your point about a broader public engagement is also really valid, and I'll have a think about that.
Yeah, it's probably a long time since we had a really wide discussion with Londoners about what they want from our transport system. So, just a couple of short ones. So we've talked about the process and your engagement with government and, you know, the guidelines and everything like that. Do you have confidence that if you say no to one or more of the applications for permits, that's going to be, you know, have the government give you the confidence that you genuinely are the decision makers on this permit?
So, well, we're not the decision makers on the permit, but the permit
Apologies.
can't. But this is what's interesting, isn't it? So we're not the grantors of the permit, but the permit can't be issued without our consent.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, if we
Yeah.
don't give our consent, then the permit can't be issued.
Yes, and that's a technical right you have. Do you have the confidence in discussions with DfT or any other, you know, government authorities that they are expecting that might be an option?
Expecting that we might refuse consent?
Yes.
I think they probably are aware that it's an option, because I think we have been clear with them, particularly around our concerns about the fact that we can't have this kind of ongoing suspension kind of rule, that actually we will need to be very cautious in our approach to this, because we have this one chance to make sure that the vehicles and the services do what we need them to do. So DVSA has definitely been very open with us in our conversations to date that if the application doesn't work for us, then we can refuse. So that is a real option.
That's fine.
And they acknowledge.
Because the interesting thing is when I asked the operators what they do, if you said no, they all sort of sat there like lemons, which, you know, it wasn't like, oh, we'll try again or we're doing this. It was just like, I hadn't even considered it, which concerned me a little bit, but may not be a problem on your side.
And hopefully that's because they are planning to do really rigorous pre-engagement with us. They will look at the guidance, and if that happens and the permit application comes in and it meets all our requirements, then that's maybe why they're assuming that then consent will be given. And I think if it does meet all of the requirements, then consent can be given. But if we have concerns that they're not, then we will be able to refuse consent. And I think DVSA are conscious about that.
That's fine, thanks. And finally, I don't think this has been specifically asked. We've discussed about, you know, powers that you would like to be returned, basically, or, you know, around permit length, revoking and everything like that. I don't think we've asked what opportunities there are in legislation for when that might come in, because, for instance, as we've seen in e-bikes, if we don't get in at the right time, then the sort of genie's out of the bottle. So have you identified, you know, a place in legislation or that you would specifically want that to be covered?
We are in a pilot phase for the APS, for the Assisted Passenger Service, because that's come ahead of the full regulation.
Yeah.
So we're necessarily in a pilot phase which will last up until about the end of 2027. So I think our view would be that once you move out of the pilot and into full regs, that's when you could move those powers.
Influence. Thanks. That's all from me. Cheers.
Thank you. This is all incredibly helpful. I'm writing loads of notes. So we're now moving on to a section looking at taxi and private hire jobs, and Assemblymember Prince is going to be asking questions.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So to what extent do you believe that autonomous passenger vehicles will pose a threat to black cabs and the private hire industry in general?
Take this first of all. I think first of all, there's always going to be, we believe there's always going to be a place for driver-led taxi and private hire vehicles. I think the service that they're able to provide, it's really difficult to imagine that a lot of those services can actually be provided without a driver there, particularly luggage and accessibility. So that's the first point. I think we don't know what the full effect will be. One of the things we're advocating, as we mentioned, is a very, very slow deployment. We are engaging with industry representatives on a regular basis. In fact, we're meeting the PHV senior representatives tomorrow. And we met them 2 weeks ago to discuss APS, Christina and I, and we're in listening mode to them, of course. And we understand completely their concerns.
Have you had any conversations with the government at all on around this issue?
So I think this is something that's definitely kind of perceived not just at a TfL level, but also at a GLA level. And I think especially when you look at the way that the process has been set up with our kind of consenting function, that's very much in a kind of our licensing space. So as TfL, we don't have a lot of powers in this space to make these arguments. I mean, we will be working and are talking now to taxi and private hire stakeholders, as Danny said, trying to make sure that we understand what those concerns are. Operators, potential new operators of these services have talked about there being ongoing need for other employment, for other driving roles, but I think we are definitely cognizant that this could have an impact on that workforce, and that is something that I think is felt at a GLA-wide level as well, which might be more where those conversations are happening around workforce.
When he first became mayor, in his manifesto, he said that black cabs are part of the public transport system. That he said that they would have special privileges. By his own admission, none of that has happened. In fact, I think they've even slipped out of being recognised as part of the public transport system. But clearly, the iconic black cab will require some protection. Is TfL planning to actually deliver that original manifesto pledge of giving special privileges to black cabs? Because with the black cabs, unlike any other private hire vehicle, they of course are fully equipped to take wheelchairs, and usually a wheelchair user may need assistance to get in and out of even a black cab. That's never going to be autonomised, I don't think. So it would be terrible if we got to the state where that was recognised, but because of competition from private hire vehicles, competition from driverless vehicles, there were no longer sufficient numbers of black cabs to deliver that. What's TfL's long-term plan for the black cab trade? What are they doing to ensure that we still have a significant number of black cabs after all these events take place?
So we do meet with the taxi trade quite regularly. I think you are spot on when you mention that they are quite unique in the role that they play. I suppose their privilege in a way is a number of different privileges if you were to reference them, but one, of course, within using the bus lanes and being able to access key areas to pick up and drop off. But they do play an absolute critical role. We saw that during the tube strikes, particularly, and I was out there, and it was interesting. 1 in, I think, 4 customers had some impairment. That was just my analysis. It wasn't from any sort of detailed research, as well as large elements of luggage. So I completely agree with that point. We are looking to encourage where we can more taxi drivers. Actually, there's some initiatives that we're looking at. One initiative that we launched quite recently is to try and support more people to do the knowledge by actually providing free access to Santander bikes to support the knowledge activities, to actually, of course, remove perhaps motor vehicles or other vehicles and try and reduce the cost for people wanting to become taxi drivers. Now, that may seem quite a small contribution, but that's been extremely well received, and we'll continue to look at other opportunities to encourage people to come into the trade and take up the knowledge of London.
But we have seen, especially under this mayor, we've seen a continual decline in the number of black cabs. Do you have a figure below which you would feel it was unacceptable for the black cab numbers to fall? Do you have a plan or any KPIs as to where you would like to see the black cabs, where you would see the plateau for black cabs? Is it more than we have now? Is it fewer? What is TfL's vision for black cabs?
We certainly would like to see growth in black cab drivers. We are seeing a small increase of those taking up knowledge of London. And we're working very closely with the taxi industry to look at whatever opportunities we can to bolster those numbers.
Just finally, Chair, we know now that it takes nearly 4 years to do the knowledge. What moves have been made to streamline that, to bring that down to a sensible period of time? Because frankly, 4 years, I know it is a unique skill and very difficult to learn, but 4 years seems excessive, and someone who's trying to bring up a family and do work and then do the knowledge in their spare time and support family, that's very, very difficult. And it's a long payback time, considering that the margins at the moment anyway, between being a PHV where you just go out and jump in a car and start earning, compared to black cab, the margins are not so great these days. So what's TfL doing around that?
So I know the team are continuously looking at ways of improving the knowledge and the learning. The actual knowledge team are all taxi drivers, and they are a fantastic team, really passionate, and they're really focused on how they can really speed up the process. But also, we wouldn't want to, in any way, shape or form, water down actually just what the achievement of knowledge of London is. What I don't have for you, which we can come back, which is how the sort of duration has changed in recent times through some of the efforts that the teams have made to see if we've been able to reduce that time. Now, that time is obviously impacted by things like part-time versus full-time approach, but we can look to bring some of that information for you, Keith, and share that.
Just to round it up, that would be very helpful if we could have that information. But if we could also have it, if there is a target that you have for the number of black cabs you feel is the critical mass of black cabs, and what you are doing in order to encourage more people to do the knowledge, and like with the Santander bikes, what you're introducing to encourage people and assist them in achieving that. I'll be grateful.
Okay.
Chair, thank you.
take that with them.
Thank you, Assemblymember Prince. Assemblymember Baker.
Thanks. Just following up on that. So in terms of private hire drivers, then, because they have not clear employment status, obviously they're particularly vulnerable in this situation. If we were looking at a potential reduction because of technological change in a lot of other industries, it'd be a much more managed process. So, just talking about the levers you have, in your guidelines for what you're expecting to come forward from operators, what scope is there to put in protections for drivers, transition arrangements? You've spoke about sort of potentially there being staggered numbers of vehicles on the streets. Is that something that you're able to consider, and is that something you're talking to operators about actively?
So I don't think that probably is within the kind of remit of the rationale that DVSA are expecting us to consent or not on. I also think there's an interesting point about the phasing, and we've talked about this kind of being a process which is right at the beginning. So if somebody's coming forward with, for example, 5, 10 vehicles, then the impact of that on overall driver workforce is likely to be very minimal. That's likely to scale up over time, but I think it's probably something that does become more of an issue as the scaling up occurs, which is why I think us having a sensible approach to that phasing is really important. We know that it'd be sort of catastrophic if there was a cliff edge of an entirely new driverless fleet coming in to replace a fleet of PHV drivers. So that's definitely not, we will be making sure that that's not how we see those services unfold in London. That kind of phased deployment is what we would like to see on a more manageable basis. I think there is definitely a wider conversation to have about workforce. And I think the other thing to be really clear about is that taxis and PHVs have a status within the MTS. So we have got a stated policy position that we want to have a thriving taxi trade and PHV industry. We've got a taxi and private hire action plan which sets out the things that we will do to support those drivers. We're going to continue to look at those policies, but we always keep that under, we monitor that and keep it under review as well. So if there are other things that we need to do to support those drivers, we can do that through our kind of regular policy work. But I'm not sure that the PHV driver aspect of APS is something that we'll be able to pick up in consenting.
You think it isn't, or you're sort of not inclined to? Because obviously, as you've said, having private hire fleet is in the MTS, and you have all sorts of regulatory powers, as we know, as we've discussed, over that that you won't have at this stage over autonomous passenger vehicles. So surely there is scope in there to put something in terms of managing workforce transition. Because if it's not you, who is it? Where does this conversation that clearly needs to happen?
I think it probably does need to happen at a government level because it is a significant new technology. So there's part of this which is about APS and part of it which is just about AV technology in general. So that's also going to apply to the freight industry. It's going to apply to a number of different industries. So I think there is a government level conversation that needs to be had about how AV technology integrates and what the impact is on the workforce and how workforces need to adapt. I think what we've seen with the taxi and private hire industry is they have adapted to a lot of different changes in London transport, and we will support them to adapt to this as well. But as Danny said, we don't have a fixed number of PHV drivers that we need to have in London.
We know that. We've had that discussion many times.
Exactly. Yes. So being able to say, actually, you can't...
Maybe now might be a good time to work out what the numbers of, private hire, whether that be with a human being or not a human being, is appropriate for London. Surely now would be a good time.
Well, I think that's exactly what we're looking at now, is that's going to vary massively from place to place, but we can't, so we have no control. There is a number of both taxi drivers and PHV drivers that could be licensed, but TfL has no control about where they are or when they are. So if everybody, not that this would happen, but if everybody stayed home on a given day, there would be none available. And if everybody who was licensed was out on a given day, you'd probably have too many vehicles on the road. So there is a sort of balance between how many licensed vehicles and drivers you have and how many you need on road at any given time in any given place. And I think this is where we come back to this consent and permitting, is actually the needs that you might have in outer London, in places that might have fewer public transport options, particularly at certain times of day, will be different from they are in other parts of London, parts of central and inner London, where you have very many alternatives. So it's not as black and white as we need X many of these.
No, I know that, but
Yeah.
it is an odd thing not for TfL not to have a view on, especially at this time, even with the complexities of London's transport, because ultimately there aren't any days where everyone's out and or no one's out. But just, I mean, this seems to come to the heart of a problem that we've talked a few times, which is TfL doesn't really feel a direct responsibility for taxi and private hire drivers. And now you're saying actually it's the government's responsibility. But as you've said, you're speaking to taxi and private hire representatives, but really then saying you don't really think that you're the people that conversation should be being had with, because you don't think you've got the power to influence. I mean, it's all, you know,
I think
it's just,
a role.
it feels very difficult then for, as we've seen, private hire, you know, drivers and taxi driver and representatives to know how they influence something when they don't have an employer directly. TfL are saying, well, it's not us, Gov, and the government are over there doing whatever the government are doing in this space, which is mostly at the moment thinking about tech. So what are, you know, representatives and drivers supposed to do?
So I do think that we have a role to play, and we have been engaging with those representatives to try and understand what they think the impacts will be, what they would like to see, how we can help support in that. So that might be that we can support through training, how we can support in terms of talking about their services, what that means in terms of what we do on street. So it's not that we don't have a role. I just think there is also a larger argument about the role of AI and technology and what the implications of that for a workforce that TfL can't do by itself.
No. Asking you to do all of it, but this bit, it just seems like a massive missed opportunity to take a more positive approach to this sector that basically, you know, the committee's been asking you to do for a long time. And I think that's driving some of the, you know, worry and dissatisfaction that we're seeing from drivers. You know, where is their voice? How are they going to be listened to? But we are where we are, I suppose. To the Chair.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said, Christina. You were talking about the need for private hire vehicles, potentially more in outer London where there are fewer public transport options. Do you have any way that you can make your consent contingent on where vehicles are operating?
So that is one of the things that we do expect to have, a role in. So understanding geographical area, understanding number of vehicles, times of day. One of the things that we'll expect to see is people talking about how they can help areas with lower PTALs, so public transport accessibility levels. So yeah, absolutely, we'll be looking to those applicants to be clear about how are they going to be supporting MTS objectives, but in those ways, thinking about geographies, thinking about alternatives, thinking about how it complements the public transport network.
Brilliant, thank you very much. OK, so we're now moving on to our next section, which is about road danger reduction. And Assemblymember Hirani.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask Danny first, because you've already mentioned Vision Zero earlier on in your remarks. So just a question really about how autonomous passenger vehicle technology can help achieve Vision Zero, how it aligns or misaligns with it, and what assessment TfL has made on the impact of these vehicles on the Vision Zero targets.
Sorry. I think in terms of the guidance, we will be really clear about it being expecting it to be able to demonstrate that it's proactively supporting the Vision Zero targets. I think the government regulations have been clear that the expectation is for the vehicle to be at least as safe as a driver, as an absolute, as a minimum benchmark. I think it's quite early days for us to say, you know, what the exact impact would be. I think the requirements that we would look to receive as part of that guidance or part of our consent would include real data and transparency. We think that's really, really critical. And regular dialogue, of course, with the operators. So there's a number of those sort of factors that we would consider to be really, really important for anyone that we would consider providing consent for the APS.
Okay, and just in terms of the current safety definitions and standards in the UK for these vehicles, are they sufficient enough to ensure safe deployment of the vehicles in line with the road danger reduction targets?
I think it's a position for government that have made and to have established within their regulation.
But from your perspective, are they where they should be? Christina, sorry.
Well, I was just thinking, so the way we phrased it in our kind of consultation responses is that, as Danny said, the current measure is that they must be as good as a careful and competent driver, whereas we think that should be a Vision Zero standard of safety, which means reducing both the frequency and severity of collisions. It means that ensuring the baseline keeps pace with London's evolving road safety picture, and that making sure that AVs are never a contributory factor in collisions that result in death or serious injury. So we think we need to go further than careful and competent. That's not quite enough.
And from the current testing that is happening on the streets of London, has anything thrown up concerns in terms of its impact on Vision Zero, or maybe not?
Well, we don't have any of the data from the pilots, the trials that have been undertaken at the moment. They're not. No one's obliged to share that information with us. As I said, where there have been collisions or incidents on street, which you've probably seen yourselves in the media, they have come to us and told us that they have happened, and told us, as in the case that you mentioned, that a driver has been in control of the vehicle. But we don't get any of that data ourselves as it stands.
But so the companies have been proactive in having those conversations with Transport for London?
Yes, and DVSA, I think.
And from those, has anything come up that is really cause for concern?
Well, I think what's hard for us to see at the moment is, without having access to any of that data, it seems that most of the incidents have been when a driver has been in control of the vehicle. But again, that's in and of itself, we'd want to understand if there is a reason for that, or if that's, we would like to see more data. We would definitely need to understand more about what's happening. And I think there is a really important aspect of this, which is real world testing in London, which is very different from either other cities or kind of off-street testing. So we will be needing to see real-world data so that we can monitor that for ourselves.
So
but as it stands, we have very little access or no access to that data.
Yeah, but has that been requested? Because these vehicles, I mean, there's cameras internally as well as externally. It's all recorded. So, there's no reason why TfL can't, informally access it with the companies, just to help support and review to make sure that lessons can be learned.
So currently there's no obligation for them to do that.
There's no obligation.
No obligation at all. I think what we'll be really clear about within our guidance is that data and information, that there is an obligation to share that information, which is why we'd advocate a sort of steady, a slower process of deployment to give us an element of control at a manageable level before anything is progressed afterwards, or any growth is progressed after.
There's no obligations, but have you requested? So when an incident has happened that's caused concern, has harmed or endangered someone's life on the street, have TfL gone out and asked, okay, can we work with you to review this to see what's actually happened?
We have, because the information has been that the drivers it has been driver error. There has been no data on the automated vehicle to share because it's been attributed to driver error.
But I'm not asking for data or TfL for us for data, but actually it's all recorded. So you should be able to review what's happened inside and outside or the company can at the moment review what's happened inside and outside of the vehicle when an incident or a near incident has happened. So is there not any sharing of the learnings or invitation to TfL to review alongside them? Or is that something that you can have requested or not?
So I don't think we have requested it specifically in regard to those incidents. I think the way that the information has been shared with us has been, we are sharing with this with you as a matter of goodwill and transparency and honesty, and this is what we are providing you with. And I think that's where we are being very clear with them that we will need to have more than that when we are running our pilot phases. Okay. So I think they are aware of the data that we would like to see from them, and this is what they are providing us with at this point in time, which is why we're going to be very comprehensive and rigorous in our requirements.
Okay. I mean, Chair, I think this is something that you might want to follow up after the meeting, because while there are at the moment obviously vehicles being tested and there's fewer of them, it's far easier now to review if an incident happens than if there's wider rollout and more vehicles. So I'll leave that with the chair of the committee. Just in terms of alternative, well, the safety of these vehicles, will TfL assess the wider impacts such as obstruction of cycle lanes, the interference of the emergency services, passenger drop-off locations, rather than focusing solely on collision rates?
Yes, we will.
Wait, that's a nice, easy one. And just something from the US, where the US Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration wrote to AV operators regarding a pattern of interference with first responders. So how concerned are you that these AVs may start to block ambulances, fire engines, emergency services here in London?
That's the level of detail we'd also be going through in our guidance, be really clear about what won't be permitted as part of our consent.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think this goes back to the power to suspend or withdraw, though. If we're seeing that, if we're observing on streets, so obviously it will be in our guidance that we need people to not block the highway. If in the real world conditions we see that that is happening, that is where we will need to be going back to DVSA to ask them to take action on the permit, because we won't have that, but that seems the kind of place where we would want to be able to take action.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just before I bring in Assemblymember Garrett with a supplementary, I just want to clarify something about the safety piece. The definition of safety, we were told, we met with Jeff Tumlin from San Francisco, who's been involved in obviously regulating a rollout of Waymo vehicles. And he was very clear that the definition of safety is not just the avoidance of collisions. And I just wondered how much you've taken that on board, because obviously the vehicles could avoid collisions by coming to a halt in the middle of the carriageway, but then cause all sorts of congestion that causes problems for buses and other things. But also that the definition of safety that they were using in San Francisco did not include drop off and pick up from a bike lane, which is clearly a very dangerous activity, because if a passenger opens their door into the path of an oncoming cyclist, that is potentially a cause of a collision. So just to be really clear about are you kind of going beyond that sense of just collision avoidance in terms of your definitions of safety?
Yeah, and I think I touched on this earlier, but it's not just about those collisions. It's about looking at, exactly as you say, those driving practices. Where are we seeing like acceleration? Where are we seeing sudden braking? That we're looking at this not just from a kind of, we're looking at this from an outcomes perspective, but we're also looking at safe behaviours. We're also looking at it at kind of not just vehicles, but a fleet and a system level. So we'll absolutely want to be understanding what those impacts are on other road users. And again, to your point, if people feel less safe walking and cycling, then you might have fewer of them and fewer interactions. That doesn't mean that we're having positive outcomes. It means that through the behaviour of these vehicles, if that were to be an outcome, that we need to, that's having a negative impact, even if you're not seeing a kind of safety impact. Because what you're probably going to see is more people getting into more vehicles, which makes it increasingly less safe for people walking and cycling. So definitely we want to take that kind of whole system view of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just to add, including the care of people inside the vehicle and the well-being of the people inside the vehicle. So we'll be taking that into consideration in terms of age levels and things like that.
Yeah, that's something we're coming on to later in the meeting, but thank you. Assemblymember Garrett.
Yeah, it's on this question about safety, really, and I suppose benchmarking. I'm trying to understand what counts as safe enough and how you think about that in your own mind, because obviously I dare say if you had this level of scrutiny across the entire current PHV fleet, for example, I'm sure you would find, examples of harsh acceleration and so on. And obviously human drivers are killing something like 1,600 people a year in the UK. So I suppose I'm trying to understand, perhaps in data terms, what your thought process looked like. Again, when you're saying, obviously, you're looking at it to be equivalent to a safe and competent driver. I don't know what that looks like. Because when I tried to model that in data terms, the fact that you get relatively, like you have to drive millions of miles to have an expectation of even quite a small number of KSI stats, for example. And so when you look at one of these fleets, they might well have driven 1 million miles and have, few or no serious injuries, and it turns out that actually is not statistically distinguishable from even a bad driver. So I wondered how you approach that and how you would sort of try to benchmark, A, what does a safe and competent driver, or whatever the phrase was that you used, and secondly, how you try to assess whether these vehicles meet that, because obviously I appreciate the goal is Vision Zero, but obviously we're currently not there. Human drivers are not there. If they were, say, twice as safe per mile as a human driver, it might be difficult to pick that up statistically from the data that they generate.
Yeah, and I think there's the holistic review of safety as well, as we've said, not just the immediate collision, but the impact for wider road users. So I think it's the holistic approach that we'd probably take here, which is why ensuring that there's real transparency in data throughout, and that we're able to get access to all of that information as it's sort of deployed for us. I'm not sure if Christina has a wider perspective.
That safe and competent driver definition is the government's definition, and we would like to see it being more stringent than that. So I think we have higher expectations from this new tech on the basis that, we expect that promises that this is going to take out driver error will mean that you could have better safety outcomes. And I think we will want to see that evidenced in applications. So want to see that there is actual evidence sitting behind that when people put their applications in. But we think that one of the key drivers should be that we do not see AVs stated as a cause of an incident. So not just whether they are involved, but whether they are cited as a cause of an incident between other parties as well.
That's the example of your thinking. So then if there were one incident where an AV was a cause, that would effectively be a sort of complete red light from your point of view. This is it. That's one is too many.
Well, we don't have a red light, so we couldn't put our red
let's
light
imagine, I know you want to have a red light, so let's imagine a scenario where Mr. Burnham has given you that.
So I think what we would need to do is properly investigate each incident. So I don't think it's to say that it would be a binary red light or not, but I think given that we are expecting these very high safety outcomes, and that's what's being promised by this new technology, that we would want to understand if that doesn't appear to be happening, or if there has been an incident, that we really fully understand it. And if we think there is a failing somewhere in that process, then that might lead you to take a decision about a vehicle or a behaviour, or there might be a conversation that actually something can be changed or fixed in that. But I think the really important thing is that we understand it. So, as you say, we have lots of drivers who are out there now, and we've got a really strong Vision Zero action plan, which is delivering against lots of different policies that we know will be effective in different ways. This is an entirely new and untested mode. We don't know how other people, other vehicles are going to interact with it. We don't know what those real world outcomes are going to be. So the really important thing is that we do have that data so that we can investigate each and everything that comes to our attention properly. And that might end up resulting in taking a decision that you think you might need to at least suspend until you understand what's happened, or it might not. So I don't think it's about it being a really heavy-handed mechanism, but given that these vehicles aren't on street yet and could have these outcomes, that we need to be able to understand that and take action if needed.
I suppose I was just thinking, if you apply that thinking to, say, the TfL bus fleet, that kills something like 8 to 10 people a year and hospitalises maybe 40 or so people a year. And I'm sure you're going to say that's not acceptable. I'm not suggesting it's acceptable, but it is a long-term statistical pattern in the London bus fleet. But nobody would say that we should withdraw the London bus fleet. So I'm trying to understand how you think about, let's say, AVs or PHVs or cabbies, in the context of a road environment that Vision Zero is a goal, but we're a long way off it.
It would certainly need to be a measured response, but this is new, and therefore perhaps a more risk-averse approach is quite right and appropriate. But just to echo a point that we've made, once a permit is issued, we currently don't have that right to suspend, and that's something we're really keen to progress that dialogue with government to give ourselves that power, because we think it's really important.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jan.
Thank you. And Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you. So just to stick with that particular point, because on the safety standards, you've been very clear about where you are seeking to set those safety standards. But early on, Christina, you said that you want to learn from it as we go along. You said that should have influence once the vehicles are on the road, and that you hope to have ability to suspend, which has obviously just been repeated. Now, we had some really, quite frankly, disturbing evidence at the last session from one of the experts who works with testing these vehicles, who was talking about during the testing, these vehicles couldn't tell the difference whether somebody was a pedestrian or a cyclist or not, depending on what clothing they were wearing, which, as a pedestrian cyclist parent myself, had my jaw on the floor, quite frankly. How, given those concerns, how can we make sure that we do have everything in place from day one?
There is actually an open consultation at the moment on the statement of safety principles for AVs, and this is something that will be set by government. So I think it's really trying to inform through those consultations, and we have put in, a series of very strong consultation responses, and we'll continue to do that. And I think anybody, all interested parties, should be feeding into these government consultations when they are open, because this is the opportunity to really kind of set those standards. Because I agree, when you talk about that, that's exactly what we're talking about. These are the things that are of paramount importance to us. And while this sits outside of our kind of direct sphere of influence, the opportunity that we have now to try and influence through the consultations is one that we have been taking up throughout. But yeah, as I say, there is an open consultation on that now. One of the things that we are asking for is that the baseline for safety should get more stringent as general levels of safety improve. So we should be looking for that to continually improve. They must be able to interact safely and predictably with other road users, and they should be able to, as you say, identify all people, all modes, and react responsively. So it shouldn't be the case that other road users need to adapt their behaviour to respond to AVs.
So if you were not given the power to suspend or give relatively short permits, what would be your, how would you ensure that you didn't allocate a permit until you were satisfied as TfL that those levels of safety were being met?
So with the, I think you're going to hear, quite a lot of repetition. So Danny's talked about phasing and having those phased deployments so that we do start in a sort of small way and we can monitor that. I think that should be on a fairly short length permit basis. We will be as rigorous as we can with those requirements. We're going to have a good relationship with those operators and making sure that we're getting all the data that we need, so that you can start relatively small, relatively short scale, learn as you go, update the guidance if we need to, and make sure that we are getting what we need from it. Because ultimately, if we're not, then we won't be able to provide our consent. But what we would like to do, because there are potential benefits to this, is to make sure that we're getting that balance right so that we can see some of the benefits that this could bring for Londoners as well.
So you would still give consent if you didn't have the power to suspend, but you'd look at shorter term permits. Do you have any idea as to what length of permits you're looking at?
Sorry. Yeah.
Well, if I could go back to an earlier point and allow Christina to have a drop of water. I mean, it's the Vehicle Certification Agency, the government's VCA body. Their job is to authorise what is safe as a vehicle to operate on our roads. It isn't going to be our role, but I completely take your point in terms of our stringent levels of safety, and as per Christina's point, that we think the bar should be as high as possible, and we'll use whatever consent mechanisms that we have to make sure that is really robust. And whilst we continue to push for some mechanism to be able to suspend whatever that mechanism is, if we have any reason to be concerned.
Yeah, I mean, the point being is that if you're not happy with the level of consent that's agreed by the DVSA and you've sought to influence, we've sought to influence, but you're still, that isn't at the level you expect it to be, you would still, and you didn't have the power to suspend, you'd still look to consent, but with a limited permit period. So what would that look like?
I think it's probably a case-by-case approach when we start. So that phasing, it could be number of vehicles, it could be geography, it could be time of day. So if we've done everything that we're satisfied that it looks rigorous and safe, and we've got the data to back that up, and that we will continue to get the data from, then we could take that kind of at a small level for a short period of time and work with that. And then if that is successful, then you could scale it up either to a larger area or a different area or more vehicles. But if you think about a permit application for a small area with a small number of vehicles versus a London-wide permit at all times of day, that's going to require a very different approach. So I think what we want to do is be measured and proportionate and make sure that we are doing this in the most managed and manageable way we can. So we are trying to be as on the front foot as possible by making sure that our guidance is out there up front, by having the engagement up front and making really clear what we will expect and what we will require. If we don't see that, we won't be able to give our consent.
I mean, not for now, clearly, but if you've got some of those measurements or proportionality that you've alluded to there, Christina, that'd be great to share that with the committee.
I think when we've got the guidance, we can share that, and that will give some of that
Fantastic.
detail.
And going back to one of the points that comes up with PHV drivers is around, so obviously you're a licensing body, but so are authorities outside of London. If authorities outside of London on the outskirts issue licences and some of these organisations decide to circumvent effectively TfL by going through that route and then they operate in London, what would be your approach to dealing with that?
I don't know exact details, but I would hope that's exactly what the government will be providing in terms of the APS permitting, is to ensure that there is a standard across the UK. And of course, you mentioned as a TPH that there is within London, that's a challenge. And obviously, we welcome the current review of that standard to solve some of those challenges that we currently see.
So just come back to data. So we've obviously heard quite a bit about data. The reality from what we've heard is that where they currently operate in San Francisco, there is no data that's shared with the authority. We know one of these operators, they operate e-bikes, which have been talked about earlier. Again, promises of data don't materialise. How can we have any assurance at all that the data that is so essential and so available to the operators is shared with yourselves as a basic minimum?
If they don't commit to sharing that with us, we won't be able to give our consent and they won't be able to get a permit. The data sharing will be a really core component of what we require.
And will that be live data sharing?
I would have to come back to you that because there are other teams who are more expert in this than me, but it will be we'll come up with the right and appropriate way of doing that, but I don't have that detail to hand.
And just to add, we with the e-scooter trial that was launched in 2001, we do have some history there. We were able to ensure that data sharing was put in place, which has been used quite successfully in terms of how that slow deployment has progressed. So we do have some history of where it has been shared with operators previously.
Yeah, I mean, my concern, I guess, is if it's not live data and you're relying on it after incidents have occurred, then there's effectively a bit of a filter as to what you receive and then whether it's verifiable and so on and so forth. So either making sure that it's independently verifiable data or whether it's live data and that you can ensure that it's guaranteed not to have been messed with at any point. Is that, how can you ensure that is the case?
Sorry, I see what you mean. I wasn't sure what you were getting at before. So that's a good question about the verification of data. Again, I'm sure there are data scientists who will have a better answer on how you can verify the veracity of what's been provided. But I think that, again, making sure that we have the right and correct, as you say, being confident in the data that we're being given will be a really core part of that guidance. I'm sure we can come forward with a bit more of that detail.
Great. And I guess just go back to the point that Assemblymember Garrett was raising earlier again, and I guess if you're clear up front as to what you would be expecting as to what would be the threshold as to actually we would need to suspend, not renew the permits, et cetera, up front, then that would be very clear with the operators as to where those expectations have been set from the onset, basically. Is that something you can be clear with them on that as well?
Well, we don't have, once we've issued consent, we have no power to unissue consent. So
in terms of, I appreciate you said you would still consent, but you would look to have short-term permits, so you would not seek to renew.
If we saw that there was a problem and they came forward with another permit application with the same approach, and which had been proven not to work, then we wouldn't be able to consent to that.
All right. Thanks. Sorry, I've got questions. Some operators have indicated that they've considered applying for a private hire licence from TfL to deploy their vehicles with a safety driver behind the wheel. What steps are TfL planning to ensure that deployments align with the Vision Zero targets?
I touched on this as earlier in the most sort of publicised Uber and Wave approach, which, again, the really key point and differentiation there is with a driver who is responsible and accountable for that vehicle and for the activities within that vehicle. And we would apply the same stringent levels of licence and regulation as we do currently today. The vehicle, of course, will need to be inspected because that will be some additions to that, what we would normally see, and that, again, will go through quite a rigorous process, which includes actually independent verification of cyber risks attached to the vehicle. But we're in discussions at the moment, but no announcement.
Thank you. I've just got one extra question, which is, at the moment, the autonomous vehicles that are operating on London's roads are all operated with a autonomous specialist or a human safety driver or whatever they're called. So any of the mistakes that the vehicles are making at the moment are deemed to be the responsibility of the human safety driver rather than the autonomous vehicle. So it's a really big shifting to the potential for a vehicle operating completely autonomously. Are you confident that you are getting all the information about incident? You know, we heard about a motorcyclist knocked off a motorbike in Old Kent Road, where I think the vehicle, there was confusion about the traffic signals. There was, the motorcyclist had a green light, but the vehicle didn't possibly understand the difference between green to go right and green to go straight ahead. And so got confused by the layout of the lights. But so when these kind of glitches and mistakes happen, are you getting that information about what's happening? Are they sharing with you? Because at the moment, it's, you know, those are not deemed to be the mistakes of the vehicle; they're deemed to be the mistake of the human in charge of the vehicle at the time. So just what agency have you got in that space?
So if I just take this, so you're right. We are taking it on goodwill of the information that is being shared with us. There is no other obligation for them to share more than that. And then each time the information is received back, that incident as related to driver and controls, as opposed to whilst operating in an autonomous level. But we simply don't have more information, nor could we, you know, verify indeed that the information that we've got is 100% correct currently. And you know, that's unfortunately where we are with the number of incidents that we've become aware of. But we have got good engagement with them. And I think if we take it on face value, these operators of course are investing quite a lot in the future here, and they are obviously not looking to be unsafe. And we take them, of course, on that face value. Why would they want to? They understand the impact on small incidents can have on public opinion, which has quite a big factor, as well as their own sort of business models. But they are in communication with us, but we can't verify currently the information that we're receiving from them.
So it wouldn't be enough under a pilot that was operating with our consent that we would need to have more information than we have now. And I think it's something that we could have as part of those conversations around applications, is understanding data available from any previous incidents. So, as Danny said, we don't have access to more of that information now, but we will in future, and we would need to have more than this in future, and perhaps asking about previous events is something that we might be able to do as part of those permit application conversations.
We are very lucky to have a visit today from Lee Academy Halley from Greenwich. So welcome to all of you. We are currently discussing autonomous passenger vehicles and discussing that with Transport for London, who are making decisions at the moment about how to what kind of rules have to be in place for these vehicles to be able to operate on London streets. And we're just moving on from talking about road danger reduction to traffic reduction, active travel and public transport. And Assembly Member Garrett it's over to you. It is. Question. No, you're quite right. I am so sorry. I got distracted by being efficient about welcoming all of you into the chamber and forgot to look at my notes and my big arrows pointing to Joe being the next person to ask a question. So, Assembly Member McCartney, question 10.
Thank you. The Mayor's transport strategy has a goal that by 2041, 80% of all journeys in London will be by public transport, cycle or foot. Have you done any assessment as to how autonomous vehicles will affect this target?
So yeah, I think this goes back to what we were saying sort of right at the beginning, is there is potential that this could help you reach that target if actually you had a fleet of automated vehicles that made it sufficiently easy for people to use one of those vehicles when they needed to use a car, such that they didn't have to own a vehicle of their own. And actually, we know that there's a really big correlation between car ownership and use. So if we drive down car ownership because people have access to a car when they need it through some other shared service like an AV, then you could see that this could help move you away from a private car mode share and have a more, get you closer to that 80% of people walking, cycling, and using public transport. It could also help fill some of the gaps in the public transport network. So if you do need or feel like you need a car to be able to access rail or a station or to do your kind of trip chaining, that this might be able to help fill a gap in that, which means that it opens up more public transport journeys to you, which again might help people make better use of existing public transport where they don't feel able to now. It might also help with some people who do rely on a vehicle, who do rely on a vehicle to be able to make use of these fleets. But there is a risk that if you don't get that right, that actually what you see is increasing numbers of people using more convenient use of cars, because if you have more of them, then you have a bigger risk of traffic and congestion, and that's one of our real key concerns, that if we're just adding vehicles into this without having that substitution effect, then we're just going to increase traffic and congestion. That will make buses slower and less attractive, so that might mean that you get a pull-off bus services, and for people who are really reliant on those services, which I think we heard about earlier, that could have a real detrimental impact, make it less likely that they're able to make trips by public transport. You could also have people who are currently walking and cycling feeling less safe to do that if the interaction with these vehicles either isn't right or if there are just more of them. So I think you could have a safer network with fewer cars, less traffic, more pleasant conditions for walking and cycling, and a faster, more efficient public transport network. Or, if we get it wrong, you can have more vehicles which don't necessarily make your network safer, make public transport less attractive and sustainable. So it's really important that we get this right so that we can see it complement our ability to reach that target rather than undermine it.
And thank you. And certainly at one of our previous sessions, we've had conflicting evidence. Some people saying, well, actually, it could have a really benefit impact, as you said, but others saying, well, the business model to make profit really means that they would need to really concentrate in inner London, where we are almost at that 8% anyway, and actually it could detract from that and cause more congestion. Will you have any powers at all to say where operators can operate? Is that something you're asking for or not?
Yes, so that will be part of the applications. It will be where people want to operate, what times of day, how many vehicles, where their depots will be located. One of the other things that we're a bit worried about is empty running, so how much vehicles circulate rather than stopping and parking or while they're going between fares. So yes, that will be part of permit applications. And again, we'll be making clear, as I said, like in our guidance, we'll be looking for information about how the proposed service will A, support all those MTS objectives, but B, help specifically in areas with lower PTAL scores. So we'll be looking for people to provide services where there is less public transport options, fewer public transport options available.
And in the current scheme that's being proposed, will you actually have the power to do that? Is that something you're talking to government about?
So I think so. I think within the consenting power, the permit application will be for an area and a number of vehicles. So I think we will have a say over where they operate and when and how many vehicles, but it will be that kind of one one-off decision, so you get to make that decision at the start. There is a question about whether DVSA can vary the permit and whether they can vary the permit with or without our consent, so that's something that we need to understand a bit better. But certainly for the initial permit application, yes, we would have a say over where, when, how many vehicles.
Okay.
And just to add, we'd also get them to reflect on the fact that London's very different to previous experience in other cities. And although we touched on that in terms of safety, in terms of complex road users, curb space, very limited curb space, we've got very narrow roads in certain areas. We don't run on a grid. It doesn't work quite like that over here. So we will be asking them to reflect on congestion and what, how they would minimise within their operation, noting that we are different rather than relying on evidence that they may have seen as successful operating in other cities.
So it seems to me that you're hoping for a regulatory system that's going to be quite flexible. So if, for example, we see extra congestion in one part, you can then not issue any more licences for that area and offer them in another part. Is that fair?
So what we won't be able to do is force anybody to go to an area that they don't want to be in. But yes, we will be able to manage number of vehicles and operations within an area.
Okay, thank you. Be interested to see how that works out legally, but thank you.
Indeed, it's all very complicated. Assembly Member Garrett.
Yes. Obviously, there's been a big focus this morning on self-driving taxis, basically robo-taxis or whatever you want to call them. One of the points, I think, if we think back to our first meeting on this topic where we had a sort of panel of experts of various sorts, one of the points they made was that this technology could drive maybe not any, but many different types of vehicle. And so the focus on taxis is a very narrow frame to think about it. And actually, when we spoke to the people at Wave, who are obviously developing this, they made a very similar point, which was that they are technically not developing a robo-taxi. They're developing an AI driver which could drive essentially any kind of vehicle from an HGV to I don't know what the smallest thing is they would look at, some kind of little pod maybe. And so the way in which that technology could fit into a public transport system is more than just what can we do with taxis and how can that work. So what kind of thoughts have you had about, from TfL's point of view, what this technology could do beyond just robo-taxis and PHV type vehicles?
Yeah, so I think I touched on this right at the beginning, that there is a lot of focus on these types of services now because they're what's coming forward most quickly. But under the APS pilots, they could also be bus-like services. I don't think we're not aware of anybody who's proposing to launch one of those at the moment, but you could see that somebody might want to do that. We currently don't have any plans to introduce those ourselves. I think in a similar way to taxis and PHVs, we think there is a really important role that is being played by those drivers. But I think freight that you've mentioned is another likely of the earlier use cases in all likelihood. So I think we have been thinking about what the impacts of that could be. As I say, more of the focus at the moment is around this guidance, but I think freight in particular is one. And as you say, there are so many different types of vehicles that could be relevant to that. So it could be about your HGVs or your very larger vehicles, or it could be down to that kind of last mile, can you put something into a much smaller vehicle? So that is definitely something that we are cognizant of and thinking about.
In fact, when I put this to the people from Wave when they were here, they sort of painted a picture of you can have a road where essentially every vehicle, maybe not a cyclist, but every vehicle is being driven by a robot. You've got a bus, a van, a supermarket delivery van, an Amazon van, taxis and private vehicles of various sorts, people's own personal cars, where they tap in the GPS coordinates and off it goes, and they just stare out the window or stare at their phone or something, and everything on the road, really, or certainly everything on four wheels is being self-driven. And obviously that's a very different view of what the road looks like compared with now. So is that kind of, that's obviously their long-term vision that they think that they're building towards with their technology. And taxis, they were quite clear, taxis are a lucrative way of funding what is otherwise a very expensive bit of R&D. At TfL, are you thinking about what that world looks like? That don't know how far away it is, 10 years, maybe 20 years, who knows?
I think in London we have a hugely rich and varied transport network which caters for hugely different types of trips and people and start and end points for people with lots of different needs. And I can't see us getting to a point in London, certainly in the next 10 years, where you replace the rich tapestry of what we've got now with a fully sort of robotised system, if you like. So I think when you look at something like the bus network, it's incredibly complex. The needs of people are changing all the time. When we put in another piece of infrastructure, put in the Elizabeth line, that massively changes what people need from the bus network. And actually, the way that we can manage and plan for all of these services in an integrated way makes for a really sort of complementary system. So that if you are a customer, we take this kind of whole journey experience. From when you leave your front door, you need the street to be safe and accessible and accommodating so that you can get to a bus stop or a cycle or a station. And I think in London, we're unlikely to see that replaced by a series of wholly automated vehicles, particularly when you think around the accessibility needs that we've been talking about so far today. There are so many people who actually really value that interaction with the driver, who get that guidance and support, who sometimes need physical support. So I can't see that being London's sort of near-term future. But I think as we see, as you say, the different use cases for these vehicles, there will be benefits that they can bring. So we need to make sure that we can sort of integrate them into our existing networks to try and make everything, to get better outcomes.
Yeah, one of the scenarios that I don't think it was in the meeting, I think it was when we were discussing on the site visit, Wave pointed out that in the long distant past, maybe not that long distant, I can remember it, there were two people working on a bus. You'd have a driver and a conductor. And in the modern, efficient world that we live in, one of those people gets removed, and now we just have one person on a bus. And their point was, in fact, potentially with their technology, that one person could be the conductor rather than the driver. So you would have a person in the bus interacting with passengers, checking tickets, helping people on and off, or what have you, the kinds of things that conductors used to do. And the bus is driving itself somewhat the way that the DLR works, in fact. Is that something that TfL has explored at all, the way with, as a long-term future of a bus network designed around that kind of approach?
It's not something we're planning for now.
And I would say that if there's
to be fair, I didn't ask if you're planning, because the technology doesn't yet exist. I was just curious whether you'd thought about what that might look like.
I was just going to add, I think if you look at one of the most complex jobs that there are, one of the most difficult jobs that there are, with the multiple scenarios, you would definitely put a bus driver on top of that, but no view perspective in the horizon in regards. But I do think a bus driver position is a really key one, and can't see that being replaced at any point.
Okay, so bus driver jobs safe for now. Hopefully they'll have air conditioning as well while they're sitting there. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. So we're going to. Sorry. Assemblymember Baker.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on those discussions about other uses of the tech. So I agree. Our bus network carries, a huge variety of people and hugely complex. The idea of not having bus drivers is a very, very long way away, I think, on London's streets. But we've spoken to Oslo, and they're taking a more proactive approach to actively sort of deciding where the tech could fill gaps. So not replacing their public transport system, but going right in this area, in Outer Oslo, whatever they call it. We can have we'd like to try and work to develop and procure a service that fills a gap. Now, is that something that you're looking at or you're exploring? Because at the moment, obviously, we're really reliant on what these, the operators, prospective operators, are offering, and then trying to shape it to what we think London's transport's needs are. Why can we not go out and be a bit more proactive about that?
So I think the kind of London context is very different from the Oslo context and the reach of the network and the sort of...
I would accept that, but we've already talked about the fact that there are places in outer London where public transport is lower. So, yes, we're not Norway, but we still have some of the same challenges, which is how do we provide public transport in an area where demand is more scattered?
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think that the difference, is that these could these vehicles could serve a really useful purpose in filling some of those gaps, which we do have, but we also have a very comprehensive transport network, so there's probably less of a need for a kind of formalised, I can't think of a better word than gap-filling service. But if you were going to run something like that as TfL, that would likely require a huge subsidy. And then we also need to think about the fact that they are still motorised vehicles. So how do we make sure that we don't create sort of long-term reliance on cars filling gaps, if you like? So I think
it doesn't necessarily need to be a car, though, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So it's not. I mean, these are effectively sort of,
so like
ride-sharing vehicles going on a loop.
And we have looked at that before.
We looked at demand responsive. I didn't feel it was and I know that that's trialled and didn't feel that it was quite the same.
It's not
model.
Exactly the same. So,
no.
But I think we're open to looking at things like that. I think that's an example of actually we did think that something like that could have potential. And we did look at it, so we are open to looking at those.
Yeah, but the tech is different now. I suppose the question is, in this situation, we're sitting there. People are making bids to us about using our streets, and then we're going, oh, God, right, OK, well, we've got to stop them doing that. We've got to put a guideline around that, and we're trying to mould them into what we want, when actually what they want will be something much more expansive, because they will want much more freedom of that. So why don't we make more of an intervention? And you're saying that it's because it would require a lot of subsidy. Are you saying that it's specifically been looked at and you've ruled it out on that basis?
I think
or really that you haven't looked at it and you're just waiting for the operators to come? I just don't know why TfL aren't a bit more proactive, frankly.
OK, so I think we are being proactive, certainly in the thinking about it. I think this is a very, very nascent, evolving thing. So
we could be at the front of it, though. Well, so we're London. We should be at the front of this, Aren't we being trailed a bit?
We are trying to be at the front of it. We're trying to make sure that with our guidelines, there is a new mode that is coming. So regardless of whether we were doing our own thing or not, this is coming, and it's coming right now. So we need to be really, really careful that we put the right energy and effort into making sure that this unfolds in the right way when these private operators come to London, which they are doing. So we're doing that now. We are really open to the fact that this new tech could offer something for us as well. So I think it's really important that we do understand what that is. We learn from these pilots and we think about what that could do. So I think it's perfectly possible that we could think about how that might work in future.
So we're waiting for other people to try it out, and then London will sort of go, oh, maybe we'll do that instead of being at the forefront of it.
I think we will absolutely learn from the experience of other people operating on our streets. Yeah, we will learn from that, and I think that's a really...
No, I mean, other cities, are we requiring other cities to go first rather than us looking at this more proactively about what it could do?
So I think these vehicles are already out there operating at other cities, and we are learning from them, but they're all very different from London. So we do want to have real-world London experience. We're going to get that very soon. We will learn from that and assess whether we think there are opportunities for us to help fill gaps.
So there's actually is some sort of trial. I can't quite get to the basis of it, but there's a little 10-seater pod going across Hammersmith Bridge between Hammersmith and Barnes. But apparently... TfL say have absolutely no plans to do any of this. So, I mean, I don't know whether that's a good specific use case for it, but there is an example of people saying, here's a gap that we could use with a different type of bus. But again, TfL are just going, no, that's none of that. Or what's the thinking behind that?
So we are not involved in that trial. We don't know the details of it. Trials are allowed. Trials are happening now. It's not somewhere we are prioritising funding for now, is putting more money into AV. So we will learn from what's happening, and we will, if there is an opportunity for us to help expand the public transport network reach with these, we're hoping that we'll be able to do that through shaping.
But that's not public transport, to be clear.
No.
Robotaxis are not going to be public transport. So, you're just trying to manage, like in private hire, you're just trying to manage what's coming anyway.
Trying to harness the benefits of it.
Okay.
I mean,
Sorry,
just to add,
yeah.
I think it might be the same operator. I can't for the life of me remember the name, but we are reaching out to them because they haven't reached out to us.
Okay.
But we were proactively reaching out to them to understand a bit more about what their intentions are.
Yeah, maybe TfL could have given quite a slightly more open quote than just saying, oh, no, no plans on that, but it doesn't sound very... but, hey, I suspect that wasn't your
We'd certainly
your
encourage, if people have got plans that they do approach us, we're quite approachable. we'd like to think, but certainly we'll be proactively reaching out to this group.
Thanks. And can I just ask, going back to earlier questions, in terms of the impact that that congestion, there might be on congestion, obviously you've talked about guidelines on areas and size of fleet and stuff like that, but have you managed to do any modelling on the impact of, say, an unrestricted, is this unrestricted sort of robo-taxi fleet or something else? You know, what thinking has gone behind some of the guidelines that you're setting now?
So the thinking that's going into them is looking at where we think there is potential for these to add to complement our objectives, as we talked about, so where it will help expand the reach of the public transport network, where we don't have already busy and congested areas that we're just going to add more vehicles to. So that's the kind of thing that's informing it. We're not doing modelling of what an unconstrained additional fleet would look like, because we don't have any proposals to bring forward unconstrained fleets of new cars into London. So I think what we'll be doing is looking at them on a case-by-case basis, looking at the areas that they're planning to launch in, number of vehicles, and at that point you'll be able to make an assessment of what you think the impact of that proposal would be, and make a decision on that basis.
Okay, back to you, Chair.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to look at accessibility, and unless, did you want to take a... Nope. And so, Assembly Member Bakari.
Thank you, Chair. We've done a call for evidence, and one of the submissions that we got was from Motability that stated that evidence from early automated vehicle and robo-taxi deployment suggests that accessibility has often been treated as an issue to be managed after deployment. This is a bit of a concern for me, a bit of a red flag in terms of how disabled and deaf communities are feeling that they're being consulted on properly. So what steps is TfL making sure that the decisions about deployment of autonomous passenger vehicles in London is fully consulting disabled Londoners?
So we definitely, I think, want to understand, again, what the potential benefits are. And we've heard some of that from our stakeholders and from operators as well. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, what we'd like to do is get this guidance together so we've got something tangible to talk to people about. And then we will be engaging people to make sure that we've got feedback on that. And that, I'm sure, will be an iterative bit of... The way we update that guidance will be iterative as we kind of learn and as we go along.
The submission is also talking about co-production, and that there is a real concern about how the companies are approaching co-production. And as you know, and as I've always said, and many here know that I say engagement is not co-production, it's a different approach. And I'm concerned about how the AV companies are not going to have an approach that is co-production, that does have that level of engagement, that really does involve communities. What are you going to do to ensure that happens?
There's a two-pronged approach. One is we're going to set out what our accessibility requirements are. So that will include operators needing to set out how they'll support disabled, older neurodivergent users, accommodate wheelchair users, assistance dogs, mobility aids, provide accessible booking channels, so taking a whole journey approach, so how you book it, how you access the vehicle, including alternatives to the app-only models, providing access to a staffed call centre throughout the journey, delivering accessible information and communications, explaining how the assistance which is currently provided by drivers will be replicated where necessary. So we're going to set out our own kind of stipulations about what we would like to see, but we will also say that we expect them to have engaged with those stakeholders before they come for that permit application. So a two-pronged approach of setting out what we would like to see and evidence that they have engaged with and responded to.
Are you having the same practices within TfL, for example, in your guidance document?
So that's what we'd like, once we have this guide, because it is a fiendishly kind of complex thing to draw together, so we think it's more useful if we have something to show people to engage on, but yes, we will be engaging with that guidance. So
in terms of making sure that we're taking all the approaches to make sure that transport is accessible to all Londoners, what are you going to do to ensure that, what form of deployments are you taking in terms of making sure that these benefits are realised, and how will TfL ensure that the benefits are done in a way that is very clear that it is going to be beneficial to disabled Londoners? What are you going to be doing?
So I think that will need to be part of that, the monitoring and data collection as well, will be understanding what those there will be data collected, I'm sure, on user satisfaction, and those will be needed to understand all of that, and from an accessibility perspective as well, how customers are finding those services and the kind of design features that have been built in. But it needs to, we're looking for a real kind of a level of detail around how you book, how you find a vehicle on street, how you enter the vehicle, how you receive support during the journey, how you contact the permit holder if you need to, how you can raise a concern or complaints, how those concerns and complaints are dealt with, thinking about the vehicle design, the service design, the booking check. So we are going to set out a comprehensive list of things that we would like to see happen and be monitored, and that complemented with their own.
So Waymo have already admitted that they don't have any wheelchair accessible vehicles. In some ways that's good news for the black cab industry, because that they will be the only service that is fully wheelchair accessible. But are you going to be encouraging that kind of vehicle design from these autonomous vehicle companies, or are you going to let them just fit one particular type of community that they can serve, and perhaps not the wheelchair community?
I think we would like to see more wheelchair accessible vehicles. So as you say, the entire black cab fleet is wheelchair accessible, and when we have talked to some of those trade reps, actually, the thing that they are really rightly proud of is that they have an entirely different offering actually with a taxi driver and a wheelchair accessible vehicle, which isn't easily replicated. But nevertheless, having more wheelchair accessible vehicles would be a good thing. So we would encourage people to come forward with more wheelchair accessible vehicles, but then with the appropriate design and service support around it so that they are usable.
And you're going to continue to ensure that TfL is meeting the Mayor's ambitions to expand and the access to travel, but also to reduce journey times as well for accessibility needs? Is that something you're...
Yes, I think these are vehicles which could play an important role for some of the people that you're talking about, some of the groups and people that you're talking about.
I mean, we're hearing that the companies are going to make sure there's less time for walking or accessing the actual vehicles themselves, aren't they? So that is all part of your push to make sure that they're meeting everyone's needs.
Well, I don't think anybody can make any promises about pick down and set up yet, because we haven't had any of those conversations. But we'll need to make sure that that's happening in the right places where it's appropriate. I don't think it will necessarily be the case that you can just take somebody to point X and be able to drop them off at the curbside, because we don't know what other road infrastructure and other demands there will be. So we will want to make sure that they can support accessibility, but in a way that doesn't undermine the rest of the other road users. We've
been hearing about particular voices like the disabled community, but also from workers and drivers, from PHV drivers to black cab drivers, and the concerns that have been coming through across this meeting about where is their voice, within TfL's role, and how are they going to be heard. And in June, I did pass on a motion that was referred to the committee about creating a Pacific role. Now, this is where I was talking about capacity earlier. And having a taxi and private hire commissioner, or a particular taxi and hire kind of role within TfL to deal with all these issues. We've got. You've just been hearing about the complexities, the voices, the communities that feel like they're not being engaged enough or not getting enough say from TfL. Can you not see that there is a need for a particular lead within TfL to really tackle some of these issues?
I'll take that. So my role, effectively, as from March, is accountable for taxi and private hire licence and regulation. So I suppose that's indeed what you described. I feel is a key part.
So you feel like you are that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we meet the trade and the representatives quite regularly on very detailed conversations, from workplace violence and aggression to a range of subjects that people may be concerned about. But I think what you're describing is something that we're really passionate about. So I feel very proud that the fact that we've got drivers out there that have quite stringent level of training, and we assess them on that. So from an accessibility management point of view, from a safety point of view, and I think it's a really good standard that we uphold. Therefore, anything that's introduced, we should be looking at a safety benchmark that is really high, because that's exactly what we are providing currently, and we're proud of doing that. But to your more broader point, we are certainly listening to industry representatives. In fact, I've got a meeting with taxi private hire representatives tomorrow. We met the group 2 weeks ago, Christina and I, to discuss this very subject. But tomorrow's discussion is a much more broader subject around licensing, speeds and things like that. So we are definitely listening, and we're definitely proud of what they're doing.
I'm glad that you're proud, but the submissions and the things that we're getting from the Corps of Evidence is saying differently, that they're not feeling as if that is the approach that you're having. So why is it we are getting different responses from these groups that you're saying that you're very proud to be working with? Why is there a difference in that?
Okay, well, I would hope that would improve.
Okay.
We have gone through quite a challenging, I would say, 16 months with challenges around licence applications, which I know that the committee here would have heard quite a bit about last year, I believe, when we sort of discussed those points. We are seeing significant changes now. We are not exactly where we were prior to that challenge, but we're really getting very close to that, particularly with application renewals, licence renewals. We are seeing a significant reduction of any sort of escalated complaints. Of course, if you are hearing any complaints, please direct them.
Absolutely. We're hearing from the disabled community that co-productions are not happening with TfL, with these autonomous vehicle companies. You know, if this is the consistent message that we're getting, we are going to have to respond to that. And even though you may be proud of what you're doing, I'm concerned about the fact that we're still getting that kind of contrary evidence.
Okay.
So please do take that on board.
Completely take that on board, and we'll look to see what that any more information about that evidence to ensure that that's prioritised.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just kind of double clarify in terms of co-production, which is obviously something that's really important to disabled Londoners, and kind of really feeling that they are involved early enough in the process of kind of setting up services. Do you think that, well, partly, is there a way that the conditions for consent can include that engagement piece between the autonomous vehicle companies and groups representing deaf and disabled Londoners? And also, can you sort of just set out for us really clearly what the kind of your approach to co-production as these services kind of roll out and, you know, the trials happen and they move into a sort of consented phase, sort of just how disabled Londoners' voices are going to be included in those processes?
Yeah, sure. So I think on the first one, we will be setting out in our guidance that we will expect people to have engaged, operators to have engaged with accessibility groups ahead of going to DVSA for their permit or for that application making its way to us for consent. So that will be stated explicitly that we expect that to happen. I can't remember, that might also be in DFT's guidance, I can't remember, but it will certainly be in ours. So yes, we can require that. Secondly, the way that we will do that is that we will be sharing our guidance, our first iteration of our guidance, with those groups and taking feedback on it. And we do have groups that we meet with regularly. And I think that ongoing regular engagement is another place where we can pick up actually the response to these vehicles after they've started to roll out, and start to gather our own kind of informal feedback from people, hearing from them on the ground, as it were, as vehicles are and services are being implemented on London streets, as well as requiring information from operators on feedback from their customers, including people with accessibility needs. So I think there's a number of ways we can do that. We will make sure that our guidance reflects feedback that we get. We will require them to have engaged with people ahead of putting in the consent. We will use our ongoing engagement to gather feedback on how that's working in real life, and we'll also build that into monitoring from operators.
Mm-hmm. Back in 2022, there was a joint review by the Law Commission and the Scottish Law Commission, which recommended that government should create a statutory accessibility advisory panel, which included representation from disabled people. And that was to advise the Secretary of State for Transport, so that when decisions around consenting for autonomous vehicles were being made, that the Secretary of State would have that input from disabled people on a statutory basis. But the government didn't recommend that recommendation. They made a non-statutory commitment to establishing a disability advisory panel. Do you think it would be helpful if the government went back to the recommendations from 2022 and actually made that a statutory commitment?
Oh, sorry. So there has been mention, I think, in the some of the publications about Centre for Connected and Automated Vehicles, so CCAV Accessibility Advisory Panel. So I think there has been a proposal put forward for that. I don't think we've seen the details of that yet, but that has been proposed in one of the recent publications. So that should be a panel at sort of DFT level for rollout of accessibility. The panel is appointed, so we'll come back to you with more information on that because I don't have the most up to date. And then we obviously within TfL we've got the Independent Disability Advisory Group who we can engage on this as well. So we'll go to them once we have our guidance. There are groups within the GLA. So I'm sort of answering your question. We have panels that we use and we will use for this. Use is a slightly unpleasant word, but that we'll engage with and gather feedback from. And there will be this accessibility advisory panel, which I'll get you more information on because I haven't got enough.
That would be really good to have that extra information. And just to press again, in terms of your engagement with IDAG and the sort of groups that TfL does interact with, it's making sure that that engagement happens early enough in the process that it's actually able to really influence what happens, because I think what disabled Londoners have been telling us they find frustrating is being involved too late to be able to change things and for their voices to really count. So it's that early engagement that's really really important. So we're now moving on to our section on passenger safeguarding, and we're starting off with Assembly Member Mahfouz.
Thank you very much. I'll just start off by asking you what your expectations will be of passenger safeguarding with AV vehicles when they're rolled out from a TfL perspective.
So in terms of passenger safety, so it definitely extends beyond the kind of vehicle safety. So that includes safeguarding, personal security, emergency responses, and the protocols that surround all of those as well. So that's going to be a key consideration for us in all of our proposals. I think what we know from our current operations is that the drivers currently provide a lot of those key functions for passengers, and that's not going to be able to be replicated easily in an AV. So that's examples of helping with luggage, support getting in and out of the vehicle. So I think there is definitely a kind of space there that we need to understand how that will be filled. So we'll be looking to permit holders to show how they will secure the safety of passengers. So that means the support, the safeguarding, the reassurance before, during and after a trip. So we will need applicants to demonstrate that they can ensure passenger safety through various means, and that will be tailored for each of the services that they propose. And then they will need to consistently deliver on those. And again, that's something that we'll need to be able to monitor. Passengers will need to be able to have immediate voice contact with a staff support centre throughout the journey. They should have robust support in place for vulnerable users, which includes disabled passengers, women and girls, children, older people, and that needs to be supported by safeguarding trained and DBS check staff. And then operators should also be able to demonstrate how incidents around things like harassment antisocial behaviour and other criminal activity will be prevented, identified and managed. So that could mean things like using CCTV, continuous monitoring, really clear escalation procedures and established links with emergency services. All of that's going to need to be in place. So we're going to be setting out through the guidance these expectations, further expectations as well, I imagine, around passenger safety, particularly for more vulnerable passengers. That includes, for example, a suggestion that, or a proposal that passengers under 18 shouldn't travel unaccompanied, and that at least during the pilot phase, we shouldn't have ride pooling between unrelated bookings. So trying to think about those kind of things. So hopefully that gives a flavour.
Yeah, no, it's sorry, incredibly positive to hear what you've laid out there, and clearly a lot sits behind that. I think one of the points you talked about was about continuous monitoring, and a number of the concerns are obviously if an incident happens, obviously isn't expected in advance, but something happens in the middle of it. You've talked about women and young women, and if an incident happens of abuse or attack within the vehicle, for example, how they wouldn't be expected to have to find and push a button to call for help, that continuous monitoring would be happening, and somebody would identify that actually an intervention needs to take place, and what that intervention might look like in order to provide the immediate support that's required.
That's exactly what we'll need people to come forward with. Exactly what are those processes? What's the transparency around that? What's the reporting around it? So there's incidents within the vehicle, complaints that happen if somebody does, press a button or whatever. But how does that work with the monitoring, the evaluation, what is shared with us, how does it work with reporting to emergency services? So one of the things that we want to be able to do is to make sure that we have really good operational discussions as well, so get all our kind of emergency, the people who run the network day to day, to make sure that all the processes that need to be and should be in place are. But yeah, they're really key concerns.
And obviously those people that are then dealing with it in whatever central headquarters have got the training that you've talked about.
Exactly, need to have the training, and I think we think they need to be UK based as well, because there will be GDPR, and I think we want to make sure that they are under a UK legislative context.
Fantastic, that's really good to hear. One of the other things that has come up in the conversations that we've had so far as part of the investigation is if somebody had a medical situation, so God forbid a heart attack or stroke, something like that, it may not be entirely visible, but how do we ensure that support is provided in that sort of scenario as well?
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly what we'll be asking people to bring forward as their process for how they will identify and deal with those kinds of incidents.
And have you seen examples elsewhere of how that's been dealt with so far? Because they're not operating for the first time in London, so
I don't have that information to hand. I'm sure my teams do, but I don't have that to hand today.
And you were saying you were starting to lay out the expectations that no under 18, so no minors would be travelling in any of these vehicles. Clearly, significant safeguarding concerns about if they were to travel. A number of young people, similarly to knowing how to hijack line bikes, for example, which is quite easy to do that. There's ways of sort of circumventing that if a young person wants to try and get into one of these vehicles, perhaps in the future. I'm sure they've got very interesting ways of how to do that. Would there be double, triple layers of protection around that?
Again, we're going to need to see really good evidence of how operators propose to enforce those rules.
And again, I think one of the things that we'll definitely be aligned on, they will want this to work. They will want this to be successful. They will invest quite a lot, I imagine, not just to provide an assurance to themselves, but to us, but also to themselves in terms of their responsive times. And I think you raise a good point. I think, in terms of the behaviours of vehicles or modes when they arrive in different locations can be quite different. So we may find socially that there are trends around these vehicles that were not seen in other cities around the world, which is why information sharing is so important, and having that relationship with operators is going to be really, really important, as well as the sort of gradual deployment, which is what we're proposing.
One of the things that we had...
reminded me, this is part of that open consultation at the moment around the safety principles. So these are the kinds of points that we'll be making back into that consultation. Sorry.
No, that's really helpful. One of the things that came up at the last session that we had with the operators was that there was a question mark. So, for example, woman in the vehicle late at night being dropped off in front of her front door, but actually there might be somebody who's maybe walking down the street and either they know them or actually just doesn't look like somebody they want to be interacting with, and so they might want a normal driver may pause before they stop off or decide to go around the block again or maybe stop off in a different location. What it sounded like from the last session was actually there is no ability to alter that destination at the will of the passenger. Is that something that you feel is important, and do you think that you would be looking for that ability to interact with that destination so on through the whichever means going forward?
I think that specific example I haven't been aware of before, but it may well be that there might be more information on this, and if not, it's something we'll go away and have a look at because it's a good point.
Yeah, it's just a question mark over maybe
the sort of
from the vehicle's point of view, it's a safe place to stop, and it's not a double yellow line, a zigzag, anything like that. But actually, there are other factors that the vehicle might not take into account.
Yeah. The driver discretion from human to human is going to be quite different, isn't it? So that's a really good point that you raised.
One of the things that we've seen internationally, and of course these are very contentious vehicles that are coming onto our road. They, a lot of emotion that come around their implementation from people globally as well as locally, and we've seen a number of these vehicles being purposefully sabotaged and attacked. Now, obviously, if you were sitting in the back of the vehicle when that happened, that's an incredibly scary situation to be in. What have we learned? What are our expectations in terms of, from a provider's point of view, in terms of dealing with any such scenario? Should it be replicated here in London? And obviously, absolutely suggest that nobody does anything like that.
I think continuous communication, should they want that, with somebody who can assist and support and provide, even if it's supporting through emergency services calls if they're not in a position to make that. But we would expect that there would be able to be someone that will be supporting. And I think that's what's not just ourselves, but that's what in the APS guidance from a government point of view we'll expect as well. Probably not too dissimilar to being in a lift, but of course that's a very different type of environment, but ensuring that there is a continuous communication and response.
Yeah, I think the main concern in this sort of scenario is, presumably the person in the vehicle isn't the target of the attackers or saboteurs, but actually you're directly at risk at that particular point, as opposed to being in the lift, which is a different scenario. My final question on this is, how can you ensure that the level of safeguarding is consistent across all passenger vehicle operations, from black cabs to PHVs to AVs and so on?
So certainly there's real clear guidance with our drivers in terms of change, in terms of the training, DBS checks as well, just to make sure that we're recruiting the right people in terms of any reports of complaints, concerns, or things that are investigated and actions taken should there be a requirement to do so. So be quite clear, I suppose, in terms of our licensing. In terms of the APS permits, we will, again, and we sort of refer back to transparent reporting of data to us. We'd expect to hear about complaints and concerns. And as you can imagine, in the early stages, that's a massive factor in our confidence, but also in public confidence as well. So we'd be really interested to hear from the operators and as to how they fulfil that level of confidence with the data in which that we'll be requesting from them.
Did I hear you correctly that your rule would be that there'd be a minimum age of 18 to ride, even if someone else has booked it on their behalf? To ride solo, I mean.
I think that's for the pilot stage. We would recommend.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a proposal that we're considering just from a safeguarding point of view.
I was just curious why that was. I was thinking about I have a 16-year-old son, and I'm not saying I agree with all of this, but the government's view is that he's old enough to vote, he is old enough to have children, he's certainly old enough to travel around London on the public transport system by himself, he's been cycling to school and back for years, but he would not be deemed fit to sit in a car by himself.
So I think the thing that we want to be really clear about for for vulnerable people, in which we are including children in this, is making sure that we really understand how it works and the safeguarding in place. So it might not be the case that this is something that needs to be in place. As you say, I've got teenage children. I see cases where I might think this might be a good idea from time to time. But I think it's really important that we understand how this all works. Safeguarding is absolutely at the forefront. So we'd rather take a sort of more cautious approach to start with, do that learning, and then if a different approach needs to be taken, then that could be considered. But it's one of the things that we're thinking initially, that you could have a young person who, if they were to become unwell or fearful or uncomfortable in the vehicle without anybody else there, that feels like it could be risky.
Well, I suppose, but when you assess risk, the risk is always compared with what? So let's say he's coming home in the evening. Is my 16-year-old son safer on a night bus or safer sitting in a self-driving car by himself? So if you're saying that safeguarding is your priority,
available to you, so I guess
sure. But he would perfectly say. I mean, TfL's view is he could use his Zip Oyster card to get on a night bus with whoever else happens to be on that night bus, which is quite a cast of characters sometimes. So I guess what I'm just puzzled by is that you're focusing on let's make sure everyone is safe, but people don't exist in a world of doing this or doing nothing. They would do this or do something else. So if people are travelling around, the comparison has to be with what the alternatives are. And so for a 16-year-old, not just, for a 16-year-old, the alternative might be to get on a tube at night, or to get on a bus at night, or to walk home at night. And it just seems to me that you should be comparing the safeguarding risk of those other things, not the safeguarding risk of being in a cab versus, I don't know, teleporting or something. Seems to be the alternative risks analysis you've compared it to.
I guess there's...
Or maybe I get out of bed and go and pick him up in my car. That would be perhaps the realistic scenario.
So I think it's perfectly possible that these could evolve over time once we understand more about it, and there might be different age thresholds. But I think to start with, we've taken a view that minors, we'd want to be very clear that if they're in a vehicle without a driver, as no one really understands how these work yet, that probably taking a more cautious approach to start with is something that, as I say, we're considering, and that could change over time. But to start with, we are just taking a very cautious approach with safeguarding right at the forefront.
Okay. I suppose I'm just challenging whether that is the most cautious way of approaching it, but I think I've made my point. Thank you, Chair.
I think you have. Okay, so a few little bits of wrapping up. First of all, I think you said that remote assistance would be UK-based, and you wouldn't be accepting any remote assistance operating outside the UK. Did I understand that?
I think that's our
correct?
current position, yeah. I think that would be our assumption, that it would make sense for that to be UK.
And that those remote assistants would be DBS checked?
Yes, so I think our expectation at the moment, and what we're looking at for the guidelines, is that people would have safeguarding training, would be DBS checked, and would be UK based.
Okay, and if they have any role in remote assistance for driving, they would also hold a UK driving licence?
I can't remember specifically on that. It's something that we've talked about a lot. Let me come back to you on the specifics.
Could you come back on that? Because I think that's a fairly important kind of safety thing. Then on the destination point that Assemblymember Mahfouz raised, one of the things we heard from our meeting with San Francisco was that sometimes people were being dropped off in a location that was approximate to the pin that had been placed when the journey was booked, but actually turned out to be quite an unsafe place. And I just wonder whether you're doing any thinking about guidance around safety of the place where the drop-off happens, that people don't get dropped off somewhere that is either a big dangerous road with no crossings and very heavy traffic and no pavement, or somewhere that is very remote, isolated, and at least some kind of check that really is where the person was requesting to go. Is that an issue that you've come across?
So I think pick up and drop off needing to be somewhere safe and predictable is really important, and that will be sort of picked up. But I think it goes to that previous point about what if when you get there it doesn't feel predictable. So I think ensuring that there's a way to facilitate an alternative drop-off is something that will be important for us to question and address.
Okay, thank you. And then the final thing that has been picked up, but we heard that that Waymo vehicles in San Francisco were involved in a live fire operation with firefighters trying to fight a fire, and they'd driven over fire hoses. The kind of that interaction with emergency services, particularly when you've got a vehicle that is operating in fully autonomous mode, i.e. without a safety driver, then you've got the whole process of the emergency services getting the attention of the Waymo vehicle or the autonomous vehicle, and what conditions are you asking for in terms of those interactions? Because again, we've heard of situations taking several minutes of trying to actually get the emergency services being verified and identified by the autonomous vehicle controllers, when actually in an emergency situation you might need very speedy interaction. There could be a life and death situation. So what controls are you asking for around and reassurance you asking for around interaction with emergency services?
So we expect all the operators to be engaging closely with emergency services. As you say, it's of critical importance. Emergency services shouldn't have to change their approaches to adapt to bespoke requirements. That's just simply not good enough. The vehicles will have to work with existing practices. So again, we'll be asking to see evidence of that in any application.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything else that is lurking at the back of their brain that they want to pick up? In which case, thank you very, very much for all your answers. That was very comprehensive, and you followed us down many alleyways and rabbit holes, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you for all your responses. Please, can you just remain seated for a few moments while we finish our remaining business? Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Can I ask the committee to note its work programme and the additional activity undertaken since its last meeting, namely the site visit to Wave on the 15th of June, an informal round table with taxi and private hire stakeholders on the 19th of June, and an informal meeting with international guests held on the 1st of July 2026? The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 8th of September at 10 o'clock in the chamber at City Hall. There is no urgent business, so thank you. This meeting is now closed.
Broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority.